Hi, and welcome back to another video on Waveform 11.5. In this video, I'm going to go over step clips as they're implemented in Waveform 11.5. A step clip is really a version of a MIDI clip, meaning you can turn notes on or off. So I have one up here on the screen. This is a step clip. If I take this away, I just delete it. You can put them in now by right-clicking on any track in any open space and just do insert step clip. You can see I've got a step clip with 16 steps. It's also got a lot of rows here. This is based on general MIDI. It also is connected to the waveform instrument. So right now I have a micro drum sampler loaded and I have all of these pads. So I will get one row for every pad. If I don't want to use some of these things like a crash, I can clear the instruments that I don't plan to use. And then when I create the step clip, I won't get a row for that. So it's a little bit simpler. So in this, I'm really only going to create a pattern using just the basics. So I want to make sure I have a kick, a snare, not actually even going to use cowbell, but we will use open, closed hi-hats, and that's it. So I'm going to just delete everything else. And the reason that I'm doing that is that when I create my step clip, it will be organized with just what I need. So you can see now I've only got the rows for the instruments that I want to use. If you click the header, then over in the actions area, you have quite a lot of things you can do with these clips, like clearing variations, adding a row, adding groove. We're going to get to those in this video. You can also change the color of the step clip away from that red to something more interesting. And a lot of these things you can do from the header as well by a right click. So if I right click the header, I can change the color of it here. There is a velocity, which we'll get to later. You can also add rows variations, which I'm going to explain in a minute. So the basics here, if we want to put our kick in, and I put a kick here, 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 and here. I think pretty much every demonstration of programming a drum starts like this. And if we want to put a snare on the backbeats, what you've got here are steps. For each step, you click on these notes to turn them on or off. So next, I'm going to click on the header for the row, and you can see in actions, I can have some shortcuts for programming. I could put a note on every step, or I can put a note on every 2 steps. Some of these are also available if I right-click the row header. We have the same thing, note on every 3 steps. So I'm going to do a note on every 2 steps. I'm also going to try to make my kick part a little bit more interesting. We can also now go to an open hi-hat, maybe here, and then I just click on the other hi-hat to turn it off. If you identify what this beat is, make a note down in the comments. The next thing I'm going to do is just add a little pickup note here. All right, so now we've got a beat we can use. Now you might be wondering, well, they all sound the same, all the velocities are the same. Well, you could control that by, if you click this V, then you get the velocity gate editor. And that allows you to click on a row, like kick, and then you can adjust the percentage of the full velocity for that particular hit. So if we want to make this pickup a little bit softer, we can bring that velocity down. And we could do the same thing for the hi-hat. We could adjust these hi-hats so they're not all exactly the same. And while we're looking at the velocity editor, you can also grab the edge of these velocity levels like this to shorten them. That allows you to gate these steps if you'd like. Doesn't have so much meaning for drums, but if you're doing other kinds of programming with chords or something like that, that allows you to gate and shorten up the MIDI notes that are being played back. All right, so I'm going to close this. I've got my basic beat organized here. So what if I want to do the next bar and do a variation on this beat? Well, that's quite simple. We click on the footer, and here's where it says Add Pattern Section at End. So I'm going to click that. It will expand my clip and add a new pattern section. So now I have two pattern sections. There's a little 1 here. So this is my first variation, and this is my second variation. So I can go in here and make changes to, say, the kick or the hi-hat part to make them a little bit different. And so now I have two variations so that it's not completely repetitive. I can add another bar, right-click here, add pattern section at end, and now I have the third one. What it's done is it's copied essentially the pattern, or what we call the variation, and created a new section that we can work with. So in this one, I am going to just drop most of these hi-hats. For each section, or each pattern section, you could choose which variation is playing. So if we wanted to go back to the first variation, just click here, and you'll see down at the bottom, we have variation 1, 2, and 3. So I'll choose variation 1. We also have the option at any point, if you just wanted a new blank variation in this spot, you could just say new blank variation, and you get a completely blank slate where you could put in anything. Not only can you put in anything, but you could just randomize it. Well, in that particular case, it didn't sound so good, mostly because of those open hi-hats. Let's just turn off all the opens and see what it sounds like. So as some sort of a fill, you could just play around with that. Just click on this and do randomize each step a few times. Of course, undo also works for all these. So if I go back to my blank one, I can just undo my way back out of that. Now, if you decided you want to remove, say, this section here, it says remove this pattern section. It takes that out. You'll see the way these things work is this will repeat, so I could then just close this up. Since it works like a clip, at any point you could also just duplicate that clip. So you have some different ways to work with it. You can create additional pattern sections and use it as a single clip, or you could just duplicate it and use it that way as well. So at this point, I've got 3 variations. I'm going to use variation 1 and variation 2. As you build up and you're playing around, you have a lot of variations. You might not have them all in use. If you want to clean that up and remove the ones that are not in use, click on the header, and then in actions, there is a action for this, remove unused variations like this. I just clicked that. Now if we look at the bottom, we have only our 2 variations that are in use. So the differences in step clips in 11.5 from previous versions is the idea of variations. It existed in the previous versions, but they had a different name. Pattern sections also existed, but with a different name. We also now call these rows. The other big change is that the right-click menus have been reorganized, I think, to make more sense and to give you just the things that are most useful. Right-click menus did not exist on the row headers before either. So things like clearing the row, we even have a rename row. So instead of calling the snare 1, if you want to call it snare, then you can do that right there. A lot of things that you need to do, like the shift left, delete row, insert row, rename row, even randomizing a row. So if you wanted to take this row right click and randomize a row, it will randomize it across the entire clip, which is how that works. Now I want to explain how velocity works. Each row has a fixed velocity. And if I click on, for instance, the snare, you'll see over in the Actions panel, it says 96. 96 is the default velocity, and that's as hard as it's going to hit for that row. If you want to increase that, then you can click on this and type it in, or click this button to type it in. So if you want to be able to go all the way up to full MIDI velocity, which is 127, you need to increase that for that row. Some people have asked me, well, why can't I get the velocity all the way up? Because per row, you set the velocity of the note that you're going to play on that row when you turn those on. Well, what about the velocity editor? What the velocity editor does is gives you a percentage of whatever you set for the row. So if I set snare to velocity 110, then this means 100% of 110. So if I turn this all the way up, I'm going to get a velocity of 110. If I want that row, that snare to hit with maximum velocity when it's all the way up, I need to turn this up to 127. This is a percentage of the velocity for the note for the row. Kick is 96. If I just wanted that kick to be 110, then I need to turn that up. Some of your drum instruments will definitely play different notes or with higher intensity as you turn that velocity up. You'll also notice there's another velocity scaling at the top, this one here, which is available from the step clip header. And also in the channel, you also have the ability to scale the velocity of the whole step clip back. Typically, I would not normally use this particular one, but it is an option if you want to just kind of turn the intensity. If it's kind of like driving into your drum instrument too hard, you can turn that velocity down. But this likewise is only going to turn it down from whatever you have your channel set to. So that's how the velocity works. Now, what about swing? Another common confusion with step clips is how swing works, because you could set swing for the entire step clip, but fundamentally, swing is happening at the row level. So what is swing? Well, swing is essentially delaying alternate notes. Normally, you would set swing to 16th notes or 8th notes, and then every other note is delayed. So in an 8th note, you get a feel, instead of going like t-t-t-t, you'd be going t-t-t-t-t, which is swing or a shuffle kind of feel. In waveform, you impart swing by using groove. And the way you do groove for a step clip is you click at the top on the header, and then you apply common groove. Now these two options, basic swing 8th and 16th, are new in version 11.5. They're really just templates. You could create these on your own, but it just makes it a lot easier to dial in a level of swing. So because I've got 16 steps here, I'll use the 16th swing, and then you can put the swing amount. So with that dialed all the way up, you get a kind of a triplet feel to the swing. If I put in, say on the closed hi-hat, I'm going to change this to where I've got a note on every beat, and then I'll play this. So you could definitely hear that swing. If you wanted to adjust that back from there, then you can change the swing amount to make it more subtle. If we make it 70, somewhere in the 60s to 70s, a lot of popular 80s drum machines really did, like the MPC drum machines were really designed to work kind of in this range. I'm going to use the clear roll to take all those hi-hats out. Swing is actually saved or imparted into the step clip per row. So you could have different swing levels per row. When you set it at the top level by clicking on the header and you set the groove, apply the swing, apply the common groove amount, then when you go to the individual row, like this closed hi-hat, you'll see that it matches. But it's basically just copied that into each row. Now you could go into the row and make it different. So if you wanted your hi-hat to swing a little differently, you could, or even put it on a different groove template. You can vary that amount. So if you wanted the pickup to your kick maybe to have a stronger swing, you can put that groove amount up for the kick row, go to the hi-hat row, maybe set this down to 70. So you have quite a bit of subtle control over how that groove is applied. I use 16th if you're on a pattern that's a more, I guess, traditional swing type of a song. You could use the 8th note swing. Now, what if you don't want to use a 16-step sequencer? Well, you have the option to change any of the pattern sections to any other kind of setup that you want, even within the same step clip. So I'm going to add a pattern section at the end, click on the footer, and for this one, I'm going to shift it to where it's 12 notes, so I've got triplets. So if you go up here to where it says Common Setups, now I can choose one bar with 12 steps per bar. And you can see that now for that one, I've got 12 steps per bar. Pattern sections can be any length that you want. You can even make them one beat and make up a bar out of 4 pattern sections of various subdivisions. Normally you would program this based on the subdivisions that you want or the resolution of beats that you want for your song. Now the sound of a step clip is entirely based on what drum instrument or what other kind of virtual instrument follows it. So I'm going to shift this, I'm going to nudge it using Shift and the down arrow to the next track where I have Spitfire Labs set up on the drum sound. Spitfire Audio offers labs. It's got a wide variety of sounds that are really quite good. Now I have it on like an acoustic drum sound. So that very same clip and that same rhythm I can use in that way as well. And if I shift it down here, I've got EZDrummer. So what if you want to do some detailed editing that just doesn't lend itself to step clips? Once you've got your step clip sounding the way you'd like, but you want to add some rolls or things like that, well, you can easily convert to MIDI. If you go to the header again, right-click on the header, you'll notice that there's Convert to MIDI Clip. Just click there, and now we are in a MIDI clip. It should sound exactly the same. I'll change the color a little bit, and then I'll go into the individual notes, and maybe I want to add a roll here. So I'll just right-click here and split it to a triplet. So in Waveform 11.5, nudge works exactly the same for notes as it does for clips, meaning you hold Shift and use the arrow keys to nudge. So if I click on the open hi-hat, I'm going to convert that to a closed hi-hat by holding Shift and then down arrow. And then here I will right click and do a split to triplet. And I can then even go into one of these notes and do split to triplet again and get my rolls. The ability to go from a step clip into a MIDI clip is really powerful for additional editing. And another important new feature in version 11.5 is a step clip editor. I've been showing you editing in the inline editor, which is the traditional way you would do this. But notice if you double click on the header, it opens up into a full window. So now you have a much bigger space. All of the things that I was doing here, like if I click on these, right click, everything works the same way in the step clip editor, but you have a much larger screen to work with. In addition, we've got the velocity editor, and you can even split that off into a separate window if you'd like, and work on your step clip in that way. So with that, I'm going to go back here, fix this pattern. We'll bring this back to the top. Again, I'm using nudge by using shift and up arrow. I'm going to clear my hi-hat row, or actually I'm going to go note on every 2. For the kick, I'll do note on every 4 to get started here. I'm going to set the loop over only the first bar because I'm only going to work on the first bar. I'll adjust the size so I only see that first bar. So I'll take a second here to program in my pattern. Really fun, popular drum pattern. If you recognize what that is, make a note down in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this video, kind of a walkthrough. There are a lot of things you could do with step clips. I hope you learned something new and have a better understanding of how step clips work. Thank you very much. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel that supports the creation of this content. Thank you very much. We'll see you in another video very soon.